Who actually runs your space? Is it you or your members? We're going to talk about it in today's episode of Flex That Works. Thanks for joining us. I'm Anne-Marie and this is Graham, CEO of Baseworks. So we're talking about this today, Graham, because a lot of operators, of course, say they are in control. It's a little bit of a spicy topic because obviously we're out there having chats at loads of different spaces. And I think the reality can look different in some spaces, okay? Decisions are getting a bit delayed. Changes maybe are kind of getting softened or watered down, and growth as a result starts to slow down, all to avoid some friction. So today we're going to dig into it. Are people just building a business, or are they really trying to simply keep everyone happy? So let's start honestly. How often do you think our operators holding back because of their members?
More often than you would have thought, right? I mean, with the conversations we're having lately, there is a genuine fear of upsetting mostly the older clients. Not only the older clients, but the longer standing clients. You know, there seems to be a sense of loyalty for being there the longest, for being maybe the first customers to take a chance on the space. But then I've seen evidence of undercharging and the tail wagging the dog to an extent, and resistance to change from these members. So it's a tough one to manage for sure, especially we all want new members coming in as well.
Yeah, I know. So you think there's a little bit too much influence given, because I suppose the flip side is we talk so much about community and listening to members and hearing their voice.
That's the balancing act, isn't it? And like the question is, are all members created equally? Do all members' opinion carry the same level of weight? And yeah, there's a danger of having your space run by committee, right? And that you need to obviously avoid. As you might have a person who took a punt on you, as I said, when you would just open their doors. Then you might have the larger client who pays the bill for 10 or 15 members, and they're feeding into the bill payer. In that instance, like a small company that, you know, takes up a corner of your space. So it's all about how you weight the opinion. But I suppose at the end of the day, as you said, like, is it a business you're running, or is it
a community
space? Yeah.
And that's the piece, because I suppose so many places begin, and we actually hear operators say, now I'm not hearing it as much lately, but this, not quite as direct as I'm not here for the money, but that type of vibe. And actually when it comes down to things, I have heard people say, I know that X change would improve Y outcome in the business. However, I'm not willing to create any element of potential friction or disruption, or I don't even want to have the conversation with members. Is something that tends to come up at times. And it does lead me to asking the question to myself, like, really, what's the long-term cost? Because if you're not, you know, they say how you do one thing is how you do everything. So if you're not willing to have the conversation on, you know, maybe something simple in the use of the space and collectively, you know, some rules around using the space, that leads you then to being in a less strong footing when it comes to maybe changing a system or changing a process or putting something in that, you know, as the business owner, I suppose, only you have that particular lens as to why it's the right way for the business. And it's important, I'd say, for operators to be in that position from, you know, to be in a good standpoint, so that on the small stuff, you're able to have a direct conversation, and that lends itself then to the bigger stuff, you know, and the bigger changes that you're asking members to come along with, you know.
Yeah. I suppose, you know, there was a stage where, you know, and we've touched on it a few times, like the whole industry seems to be drawing attention from a different audience type now, from a broader audience type. So there would have been a point back in the day where, I don't want to say stagnate, but your members were your members, right? But now we're seeing, you know, fresh bodies coming through the door, fresh outlooks, and that's all going to filter into how you run your business. So you can't have your members holding you back from that, you know.
So if you were to kind of outline what you think the downsides are, what are the downsides if an operator feels like they can't be direct about the changes they want to make, or they delay changes that are ultimately going to come at some point, but they're kind of putting it off?
you can't let the tail wag the dog here. Like, you know, if you do have sticky members that have, you know, outspoken about certain aspects that don't want change or resistant to kind of what you would see as improvements, just always keep in your mind that these people could decide that they don't want to use a space anymore, get a new job, start a new business, wind up the business they have, just leave your space. There's, you know, that's the other thing here is there's a lot more option in the market now. So you can't, you know, as your space evolves, with a lot of spaces seem to be doing, the membership needs to come along with you, I think.
And I suppose change is inevitable. So if it's your business, let you be the one leading the change rather than waiting to see what happens, keeping everything the same. And then actually the change comes from somewhere else. Like, better to be ahead of the change. Yeah. I think people really respect it actually because typically in co-working spaces, 80% of people are actually working for themselves. It's quite common. And I think people find it quite inspiring actually when change happens. They might initially feel a bit uncomfortable. But I suppose ultimately, if your community is truly as strong as you feel it is, then it shouldn't break over something like a system change or needing to bring in something different.
And look, I've worked in co-working spaces for quite a while now, and sometimes you feel like, you know, there just seems to be shift change in moments. You have a moment where all faces are familiar and the same, and then all of a sudden 6 months down the line you're going, Jesus, there's a whole new fresh batch of people working from here, and you've kind of just kind of dawned on it, you're saying good luck to people that are getting new jobs, and you know, before you know it happens slowly but consistently. Before you know, like, I mean, I remember being the new guy here. I know I'm one of the longer standing resistant to change type of people.
Yes, potentially. Maybe you are the problem. I suppose, like the takeaway there for me is that avoiding that small friction is just going to lead to a bigger gap down the line. And if you're not comfortable with the small friction piece, then you're certainly not going to be comfortable having to have that bigger conversation and making what's going to feel like a bigger shift down the line. Maybe you need to get known as an operator who's actually quite responsive to the market, to memberships. Obviously, you're not changing your pricing every day of the week, but you know that if you have it's like your values will explain a lot of what goes on in a space. So if your value, maybe if one of them is constant improvement, maybe you've got a feedback box in the kitchen. People know that you're listening, and as a result, they expect iterations all the time. I think it's about managing expectations, because if that's something that people know is part of the culture, it's unlikely that they're going to get a huge shock then when you introduce some sort of change. And maybe it's a bigger change than you would normally bring in, but actually all those small little iterations, you were communicating all the time and getting those channels of communication nice and open. You're hearing feedback. You're saying, all right, I heard the feedback and here's what we did with it. Taking everything into account, here's what's happening next, you know, as opposed to keeping everything kind of nicey nice. You announce a big change and all of a sudden there's lots of opinions about it, you know.
Like you've nailed it there. In it, absolutely what I was thinking, the same thing, is it's managing expectation through communication is the key piece really, and having that two-way, you know, I mean, having your prices very clearly listed so that existing members can access a portal or go online and see what it is you're actually charging for desks now. You know, simple things like that. As you said, the suggestion box, or there's online options now as well that you can do and collect with anything like a suggestion box. Make sure you're communicating back.
Working space does that really well. Yeah, it's kind of monthly or so they come back, and as a result, like I put one in last week, and it's actually the face. What you put on it? None of your business. Get rid of Grim. But it's kind of an old school box sitting up in the kitchen. It's actually really nice. But I put it in because I was like, do you know what? Should know it was me now. Shit. Nothing major, don't worry. But as a result, I was like, do you know what? I know they'll appreciate the feedback. So there's no bad feeling from me as a member saying something. And that's the other piece. If you're being like transparent with your members actually feel more ready. That to me is real culture. That's real community. Like it's, you know, everyone being kind of pleasant with each other in surface level. Is that really community? I think like if there's actually proper depth and you're able to be transparent, look, you're not going to get into the P&L of your business with your members, but at the same time you say, guys, look, things are a bit squeezed at the moment. We've optimized absolutely everything that we can. We're going to reflect it into, memberships going forward and pricing changes.
You just got me thinking there. We're so bad at that in Ireland. In that, you go to a restaurant and, the food may not be up to scratch. And someone's giving out and the next thing the waiter comes over, it's like, how's everything fine? I
think it's in the UK as well. I think they're even more polite than we are at times, aren't they? Yeah. So I think it's definitely a factor. But it's like you don't get to. I just see it as another lens on the operators who are slow to maybe make changes because they don't want to upset their members. Potentially will be citing community because people are used to things being, and they feel so at home here and they trust that I won't, pull the rug out from under them.
Yeah.
If your relationships are really that close and something like this, actually somebody doesn't want you running your business at a loss for the sake of asking them for a couple of extra euro in the month. If they're truly committed to the space, everybody is alive in the world, awake in the world. They can see what's going on. So if prices need to change, that's just something that's happening.
We mentioned it time and time again, prices are only going to go one way and they're going. And if, as you said, the vast proportionality of your audience are business owners, managers, whatever it is, they're seeing their costs going up. They're putting their costs up on their customers. They need their cost. It's just a rising tide, unfortunately.
And look, we're talking about pricing. This does show up most clearly in pricing, right? So it looks like people undercharging because they're worried about pushback. This legacy pricing piece where you end up with 14 different plans across 30 members and you're trying to manage it then on your system. And you're putting in great systems, but you're trying to kind of nearly hack them because you're trying to put in this huge amount of variation. You are bearing the brunt of it. You're taking the friction as the operator because you're trying to keep things smooth at the outset. In actual fact, if you are bringing in a new system, it's a great chance. It's a great opportunity if you're willing to just communicate it very clearly, transparently, give people time, but put in place something that works well for you and get it right from the outset.
And the thing is, this is just a part of business as well. How often have you had a phone bill yourself or phone agreement with a phone company, and the next thing they don't want to do that pack anymore? You know what I mean? We're all moving on to this one. I was only listening to a thing on the radio last week about health insurance. Certain amount of packages are now gone. You're getting less for more money seems to be the way that they're doing it. And this is just the way of the world. It's like Coworking is a special business, but it's not a special business either.
I suppose other ways it might show up, heavy users of the space or resources getting a little bit more for their money because how long they've been around or the way that they're using the space, and they kind of get let off with things. And our rules consistent. So if somebody asks for something or requests something, is the answer different based on who is asking? You
can have favourite clients, but you can't give them preferential.
You can't have one member subsidising the other, essentially. Yeah, I know. So that tension then, the community versus business, I've talked about it there. I think true community means that people understand you're running a business, as everyone is, and ultimately that's what we're all here for. Do you think our own community, how boundaried then? We're talking about boundaries in a way, how much of that needs to be explicit and stated. If you're an operator who's been in a position whereby things have kind of bled over the edges a little bit and you'd like to kind of bring things into shape a bit, how would you go about it?
Managing expectations through communication is the key piece there.
So get started with it, basically. Start introducing, maybe softly go in with some
one thing at a time, one thing at a time. It's not I hope nobody gets inspired from this episode and drives on and starts turning their business upside down. One thing at a time. It's a good time in the world to start looking at your costs and seeing what you can do there.
I do hope people get inspired by this episode.
But I mean, not to get inspired to go right, tear up the business plan, start again,
yeah.
But
can I ask? So, from the spaces that you have seen and operators who you feel are doing it really well, what do you think that they're doing very well?
I think they have good handbooks, good agreements in place. In an ideal world, you'll never be in a position where you have to go back and refer to them, but it's there to start. But I think good handbooks are one way of doing it. I said it recently, and I keep saying it, passive aggressive things stuck to fridges and stuff just drive me bananas. That's not the way to communicate with just that.
I'd agree on that. I'd much rather someone was direct and just said it once. And maybe it's even like reissuing your handbook. People like, if you book in and you're using Baseworks, you get your post, you get your message before you come in, check out the handbook. Like, you've had a way of communicating to set a standard before people come in. If you're in a situation where you have existing members, things have run on a little bit, it's nothing actually, there's nothing wrong with going back around and say, guys, they've made some updates to the handbook, please check it out. You can do that.
Exactly. And then how many times a week or month, a year, are we clicking like updated terms and conditions for softwares and agreements that we have in place. Again, as I was saying, coworking is a special industry, but it's not a special business. Like, it still has to follow the rules, or the behaviours that we expect across other industries. And the handbook is a great one. Update your handbook, get everybody to either tick or acknowledge that they've read it or they've viewed it. Like, people, they're fairly compliant, and they then generally want to work within the rules.
But what about spaces that are multi-location? Because of course you're going to have your T's and C's and your handbooks from a brand standpoint from HQ. There are just certain uncomfortable things that you have to do if there is an outcome that you're looking to get to. And if you are an operator who wants to sleep better at night, have your space running more efficiently, be able to take decisions for the business that you as the owner know are the right decisions, be it systems or whatever the case might be, then this is the next step on. This is just something that has to take place as a result.
Outside of the coworking industry, if there's anybody listening to it that's not in the coworking industry directly, I think everybody in business has experienced clients that took to make a small bit, and then, as you said, you're doing work for free later on. I think a lot of agency owners, web developers, I think they would have all experienced that at some time in their career.
I know, so you're going to have to get everything in line at some point. Best to get out ahead of it and don't shy away. So we're talking about clear positioning as to how the space is running, or what you're doing today. It doesn't have to be the same as what you were doing previously. Having those kind of rules in place or guidelines, clearly communicating them and doing your best to get buy-in, but ultimately making the change no matter what. Like, even if there's a bit of pushback, what human doesn't push back to a bit of change is the other side of it. You're never going to avoid it altogether. Because I think members don't actually want a space that feels a bit chaotic and everything's happening in which way, they actually want a bit of order and knowing that the place is run professionally.
Spaces seem to be taken on a more professional vibe, in design and audience type. Not to say that co-working spaces weren't professional, but certainly I think systems are making it easier for operators to do what they do best. And as a result, everyone talks about systems and efficiency as a great thing, which it is ultimately. And I think the piece that people are probably hesitant about when they think about systems and bringing them in, especially if they haven't had them yet, is the actual technology. What's involved in actually onboarding and getting that into, that's getting really intelligent now, particularly, we're working a lot on that. So like, that's something that's actually taken care of. But this is a piece that nobody can do for you. It doesn't matter what tech you choose. As the provider, we can't come in and do this bit for you. Only you can manage this actual rollout element with your clients and your members. And that's the bit that you just have to be clear, I suppose, about what it is that you're looking to achieve for the business. And the right members will absolutely understand that and come on board, actually. And I think, to be honest, I would think the owner-operators would be probably struggling with this the most. I think if you're lucky enough to have a community manager or they're kind of built for this, they're wired for these kind of conversations.
Step removed.
Exactly. So,
and look, I suppose like anything, new level, new devil. So it always depends as to, begin with the end in mind. If you're going to look to grow the business in a certain way or a certain time frame, these are things that have to come as part of it.
You need to be taken part of the ambition scaling. You need to have the processes and policies in place. And then equally,
we always respect the operator's wisdom. And if it's just not the time, or there is something else that takes precedence, maybe there's something else going on in space that you need to be cognizant of, then, lead with your wisdom on that. But ultimately, you have to be able to have the uncomfortable conversations, even in a co-working space, for it to run well. All right, thanks for your time, Graham. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Flex That Works. please do share it with another operator if you found it useful. And as always, feel free to get in touch and let us know what thoughts came up for you while you were listening. Thanks, Amen.